Well, let's get right into it. Well, the former governor of Kogi State, Yaya Bello, finally appeared in court yesterday. Now, this has been a long, drawn battle. Dates back to earlier in the year, about April, EFCC trying to arrest him not being arrested, the involvement of a current governor of Kogi State, and he was declared wanted, and afterwards he visited the EFCC, and he left, and the EFCC could not detain him. There's been too much back and forth in this case, but eventually he appeared in court yesterday. But let's get into some of the build-up to this case, understanding this case in court is in court, but at least the issues that surround it, issues about the fight against corruption, governance, accountability, transparency, and the rule of law. We're joined on the program this morning by Hamzat Jamiu, a legal practitioner, counsel, the independent attorneys, joins us right here in our Abuja studio. You're welcome to the morning brief.
Thank you. Good morning.
Well, we'll expand the conversation to our guests in Abuja, in Lagos rather, but let me begin with you. Seeing this case playing out, for a lot of people, they say it looks like there are two separate laws for, the high on the one hand and the masses on the other hand. Because I look at cases around, particularly when it comes to the EFCC, and I see how fast the EFCC moves. But in the case of the former governor of Kogi State, we saw the interplay of different things. The current governor coming into the mix, security agencies also, working at cross purposes. And I wonder for you what the lessons should be from this particular episode, which, by the way, has not ended yet, but a build up to this point.
Thank you for having me. Different rules do not really apply differently to different strata of people in our country. What I think is that Yaya Bello had the resources to evade. He had the resources to evade the invitation or arrest attempted by the EFCC. So, but for a common man, you may not have the resources. Wherever you are, the EFCC might be able to find you. So, at some point, there were rumors that he was being hoarded at the government house of Kogi State, and because of the immunity of the Governor Dodo, so the EFCC could not penetrate the government house to effect his arrest. So it does not, what happens is that the rules do not apply differently to the different strata of persons we have in our society.
So basically, when you have the resources, you can lawyer up, you can security up, and it'll be tough for justice to reach you.
That is exactly what has played out. As we can see, it's obvious. Without those resources at his disposal, he wouldn't have been able to evade arrest at those times he did.
So we're looking at a case now that may have set a precedence for other cases in the future. Because I know that a lot of people, maybe current governors or people in government now, they are learning from the Yaya Bello script versus EFCC. So they're basically understanding how to maybe play things out eventually when it's their turn. So I'm thinking about this. Where exactly do you see the challenge? Is it the institution that is not empowered well enough, or the institution is not deemed to be objective enough for people to tender themselves, for court process? Is it our judicial process as well? Because that case was in court. The court actually asked him to appear before it, but nothing happened. So is it the justice system that needs to be strengthened, particularly, right? Where exactly do you see the challenge here? Because we need to ensure that in the future, we've at least protected ourselves from this kind of embarrassment.
One thing I have come to understand about Nigeria is that Nigeria has laws on virtually every facet of our lives. So, but the problem we have is enforcing those laws. So, in Yaya Bello's case, the laws were being enforced against him, but like you said, he was being evasive. You understand? And sometimes, like we've had in history, when a person leaves office as governor, perhaps he's not in the same political realm with those in power at that time. So you see that they are trying to persecute him. So perhaps he was afraid that he was not going to be prosecuted, but persecuted, and that was why he was being evasive. So I think the problem is not the laws. The laws are there. There are laws for virtually every facet of our lives. So it's just the enforceability that the problem lies with. So I do not think the institutions too. The institutions are strong. They are powerful. But the players, the office holders in those institutions are also where the problem may lie, because sometimes they are being compromised and they are unable to put the law in its full effect and potentials. So I think that's where we might have the problem.
Because for Nigerians, this was just meant to be a straightforward case, right? The allegations against you, you go to court, or at least you appear before the agency, defend yourself, and then we see the back and forth. After all, you're meant to be innocent until proven guilty, but it looks like everything is turned on its head. But let's extend this conversation to our Lagos studio. Jeffrey Bukola, over to you now.
Thank you, Kayode. The lawyer there has said something significant, and he believes that Mr. Bello had the resources to escape arrest. And we can, draw from that, to ask what we would expect going forward from this trial, and to, aid this conversation we have in our Lagos studio here, Barrister Eze Luche. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program.
Good morning. Thank you for the invite.
And so, drawing from the commentary of your colleague there, and what should we expect from the trial going forward? Will there be, the deployment of resources, to delay the justice system as well? And speaking of which, have we seen what would be a diligent preparation for prosecution on the part of the EFCC, not forgetting that the chairman had said before the arraignment that those who aided Mr. Bello to evade arrest will also be prosecuted. But have we seen that?
Unfortunately, you cannot be doing the wrong things all the time and expect a change in results. Since its inception, how many governors have been effectively prosecuted? So what has the EFCC done now that will change the narrative? The reality is that nothing is expected from this trial. And the reasons are this. It is only the governor and his deputy who have immunity from prosecution and investigation while they're in office. If in the course of during the tenure of this Yahaya Bello fellow, the EFCC observed that crimes were being committed, I can assure you the governor never went to any bank to lift any kobo. So he walked through either civil servants or proxies or whatever. So, and those people don't have immunity. So if there was any seriousness at stopping these crimes, the EFCC would have come in at that stage and stopped all this. And not all these razzmatazz of this drama, which the EFCC is now very much used to, and they always do it. And you cannot be doing drama with justice sector. You cannot. And I mean, there are a plethora of examples of this kind of drama going on. The other day, the EFCC burst through the roof of former Imo State governor's house, stormed the whole place. It was on national TV, and we thought something will come out of it. Till as I'm talking to you now, the governor is all over the place, the former governor rather. So it will be foolhardy for anybody to expect any change from this. This Yahaya Bello came to the EFCC by himself. The EFCC refused to arrest him, only for that same EFCC to wait later in the evening and go and start shooting guns at the Kogi State government's house. Is this a sign of seriousness on the part of the EFCC? Unfortunately, I don't see that seriousness. So that's why I can say without equivocation that nothing will come out of this trial. Yes, there has been the show, there has been the drama, he's been arraigned, he's been put in the dock. The court has remanded him in custody for the next 10, 12 days. Does that refund or return the monies looted to the people of Kogi State? Does that assuage their pains for lost revenue, lost income? I mean, the EFCC must take their job seriously. And from the look of things, they are not doing that. And then there is just no way. I mean, we have to attempt to be brutally frank in some of these things. Like I said initially, the governor never went to any bank to steal monies. He walked through people, and they should have arrested those people at that place. Those guys didn't have immunity.
So, one might be tempted to ask yet again, as Kadi has done, would it be the justice system that needs to be strengthened to help the EFCC do its work more diligently? Or what is missing in the administration of criminal justice? Because we know that the EFCC is the agency that is charged with that responsibility of prosecuting financial crimes. And in this case, it happens to be a former governor. So is it the establishment itself that is working against itself?
Simple. You got it. I mean, the establishment, the people who are employed in the EFCC, either they are not diligent enough or they don't really want to work, and they are waiting to catch the big fish and then maybe make some money for themselves, and because that's what happens basically. Otherwise, if the intent was to stop financial crimes, you don't wait until it becomes 100 billion. Once you see the pattern, you see it, you observe it, you step in. And you step in and you stop it. You cannot, the State Auditor General, for instance, the State Accountant General of Kogi State, the Commissioner for Finance, all these characters who were part of this process, the various contractors who were used to perpetrate these crimes, don't have immunity from prosecution. And the FCC observed these things. So why didn't you step in at that stage? Or you want us to say, okay, you were able to dock the governor of a state? Once you've docked in the past, what has it happened? How has it favored those states? How has the money stolen? What happens at the end of the day? So the issue is not the laws. Nigeria has laws for, like the lawyer in Abuja studio said, we have laws for virtually everything, even multiple laws. But if the people, the personnel who are there to implement these laws either don't know what they are doing or are not interested in actually doing what they should be doing, you can make progress. The EFCC Act is the most draconian anti-corruption act law you can see in Africa. But for goodness sake, what has it achieved? Nothing more than perhaps enriching the staff of EFCC, because you go to the EFCC car park, you see the latest vehicles there. I mean, they are also wealthy. The lawyers in the EFCC, the prosecutors make so much money. I mean, that is what happens.
Allegedly.
Well, you can use that word allegedly.
You're a lawyer.
Yes.
Can you prove it?
No. Of course I can prove it.
But for the show.
No, when I say I can prove it, if you are a civil servant and your salary, you're on a grade level, and your income is what you have is far much more than your income, there is a presumption of guilt. I
want to understand your argument.
Yes.
Are you saying the EFCC is wrong in waiting for Yaya Bello's term to end before docking him? Is that what you're saying?
No, that's what I'm saying.
So what are you saying?
What I'm saying is, if the FCC was trying to curb financial crimes, Yaya Bello throughout his tenure had immunity and his deputy. But there were other players who were actually facilitating the corruption, the embezzlement, that the EFCC should have arrested, because they should have gone into and investigated and prosecuted. And I've mentioned some of those officers: State Accountant General, the contractors, the State Auditor General, all these, the Commissioner for Finance in the states. So now, the EFCC should have come in at that stage.
The buck stop on the governor's table. There are no monies that are released in the state, at least at that scale, that will not stop at the governor's table. So you see where my argument is going?
No. The buck stops at his table, but the crime is not the only one committing the crime. Like I started by saying, the governor will not go to any bank by himself and lift the cash. So somebody did that. Somebody did the fake contracts. Somebody did the job that should not have been paid for. Somebody made the approvals. These things go in series. You can do all these things and wait for the governor. And let me tell you, the EFCC used to do that in the past. There used to be arrest of those civil servants, and then this will serve as a notice to the governor to behave himself. But now, when you see all these things going on in the state and you keep quiet, and then it's only to do these showmanship trials.
So before we go to Abuja, before we get back to Abuja to our guest, why do you think it's difficult for the EFCC to do their work? Because, for instance, I remember when Nyesom Wike was governor of Rivers State, there were allegations against the now governor, Siminala Efubara, about fraud and all of that. The EFCC said he was shielded by the then governor. It was all over the news, all over the place, all the time. So why do you think do you think the EFCC has not made effort to get some of these guys arrested, but they are being stopped by the governors? Even with the Yaya Bello's case, even to arrest him, he's been held back, also protected by his successor.
Now, when the EFCC says civil servants or contractors are being shielded by the governor, you can tell them it's a lie. Because the governor, yes, has his protection. The governor is protected by the police and DSS. Those other people don't have that kind of protection. You monitor them, monitor their movement, get to their houses and pick them up. So yes, so when they use such language, you know that they're not serious. If you're serious, you know what you can do. Yes, when they're in office, you avoid the governor and his deputy, because that'll be a waste of time. You don't have the constitutional, they have the constitutional immunity. But every other participant in the criminal activities that has taken place does not have immunity. So if the EFCC is serious, and this is why I say the personnel occupying this EFCC, they are not serious. They want to have that 10 minutes of publicity, where yes, we've gone, we wear our red uniforms, we are there to arrest, and all that showmanship. But for goodness sake, how does that address the issue of corruption? It doesn't.
All right, let's take it to Abuja. Kari, I'm sure you have more questions.
So that the fish rots from the head. If you're able to sort that, then naturally will trickle down.
What I think is, I may want to agree with Leonard Senior in Lagos State, but I also think that, when in such a case, there are pros and cons to these things. So you might want to be going after the other players, the commissioner, like you said, the commissioner for finance and the rest of them. But in that case, the state can come up and perhaps, file an action against you and say they are experiencing difficulty in carrying out their executive duties or the administration effectively because of the consistent interruption from the EFCC. Sometimes it's all about funds, money. So in a situation whereby they are unable to mobilize funds in the manner that they deem fit, it might interrupt. There won't be a seamless administration of the executive duties. So that's my opinion on that.
I want you to speak to, what makes a governor, for example, prone to possible corruption? You'd expect that that is the most taken care of person in a state. And I say this on the back of governors or ex-governors after ex-governors that we've seen involved in corruption cases. You can almost predict that once this tenure is over, this current tenure for governors, at least few of them would be prosecuted. Some of them will have to go to court. There was this case in court that eventually was struck out. The governor of Lagos State had disowned the case, but the case was meant to say, well, the EFCC should not prosecute him when he leaves office. He had said, well, he doesn't know anything about the case. Eventually, the case was struck out. So really, what do you think makes a governor prone to corruption? And isn't that something we should also be looking at? Again, you say we have laws for these things. If we have laws, what's wrong? Why aren't those laws working?
So I think what makes governors prone to corruption or corrupt practices is basically because they are human beings. We are all human beings, and if God was to delegate his powers to a man for just a second, the calamities to be carried on by such man, is unimaginable. Except that such man is, just exceptional. So the only reason, the reason why I think governors are prone to corruption is because of the powers at their disposal during the time that they were in office. So that's it basically. The Constitution gives, so much power to the executives, like the president and governors. So when you're sitting there as the governor and you have such power at your disposal, you in your state you are like the deputy god. So the limits, you might not have limits. So I think that's where the problem lies. Too much power for the executive governors.
Well, I think in some cases they call them emperors. Not just governors, they are called emperors. And I think it takes me to the point of checks and balances. So they always say that democracy or the law envisaged these things, and they put checks and balances in place. So there's the executive arm, there is the legislative arm, and the judiciary. Would we say that a governor is perpetrating corruption without the help or culpability of the legislative arm? Because the legislature is meant to serve as a check. Right. So if the governor is doing things, without a check, then you need to look at the legislature. The judiciary is also meant to act as a check. So is it fair, again, to just look at the governor or look across board? Because these checks and balances that are meant to be in place clearly didn't work out well, if indeed the governors or ex-governors are, they're found culpable of corruption.
In the case of the judiciary, the judiciary is not a Father Christmas. They can't put the laws in effect if they are not approached. So, but in the case of the legislature, like they say, the governors are the leaders of their political parties, and you find out that being the leaders, they have wide powers to determine who occupies the seats of the House of Assembly. So by doing so, by a governor electing or nominating who to occupy the seats in the House of Assembly, so the House of Assembly members become indebted to the governor, and once they're indebted to the governor, they do the bidding of the governor. So the essence of checks and balance becomes defeated.
Jeffrey, Bukola.
Yeah, Kade, let's make progress on this conversation and also look at it from the perspective of the EFCC. Speaking of which, the boss of the agency has also picked on lawyers, either for charging high fees from politicians, particularly during, post-election periods when there is a sea of litigations in court. And only recently as well, the NBA president had cause, to call out the EFCC boss, for generalizing on claims that lawyers aid, fraud through financial crimes in that sector. And I want you to respond to that as well, because the EFCC boss is convinced that that is part of the problem in the fight against financial crimes in the country.
Well, thank you very much. I think the EFCC boss himself is a lawyer. And then when he makes such broad statements, you begin to wonder where he's coming from. This finger pointing is not what's going to solve our problems at this stage in this country. The reality is that if he feels that any lawyer has committed crimes, the EFCC chairman knows what to do. So, it goes back to what I'm saying of this always trying to go for publicity and see how much he can get for mileage. If any lawyer has committed crimes, and there have been some of them lawyers who have been brought for EFCC to the EFCC for prosecution. And then the legal profession has an internal cleansing mechanism. There is a legal practitioners disciplinary committee, which when any lawyer goes against the ethics of the profession, that lawyer can be penalized or disciplined by that committee. So it is very, very wrong for the EFCC chairman to make such broad statements. He should rather look within and know what the problem is, because look, it's not strange or it's not odd. It should be odd rather that virtually all EFCC lawyers who have helped to prosecute cases end up buying, or their proxies buying, seized properties that EFCC seized from so-called corrupt officials. So the amount of corruption going on within the EFCC circle is what the chairman of the EFCC should be concerned about, and not finger pointing. If I may, let me just address a bit what the guest in Abuja mentioned. He said that the reason why governors do what they do is because they have all the powers. I think the reason is more fundamental. It is how these governors even become governors, how they emanate from the process. Our laws have checks and balances that will prevent criminal elements from becoming governors. But we have, as I'm talking to you now, there are some governors who were under travel bans, who were under EFCC watch, and then they were still imposed on certain states as governors. So what do you expect from such governors when they leave office? And it's not one or two. Before they became governors, they had travel bans. They couldn't travel out of the country because of corruption charges. So the issue is the political process. How do these characters, who we call governors, emanate? What was their pedigree before they become governors? And even presidents, actually. Because it's when you know what somebody can do before he gets into office, he will, with the amount of power and aura that surrounds his office, he will do much more. Before they used to steal 10%. Now these governors steal virtually the entire state budget. And that is why the EFCC is misusing, or they're not rising up to expectations. When the EFCC was created, Nigerians thought actually that yes, there'll be a means to address corruption. But then with benefit of hindsight, when you look at the entire EFCC structure, right from the first chairman, Nuhu Ribadu, Farida Waziri, Lamrude, Magu, what do you observe? You see that these guys become extraordinarily wealthy when they become EFCC chairman. That means something is wrong with the system. The EFCC that should be tackling corruption now becomes a bastion of corruption itself. And until we're able to address that, and I'm speaking without equivocations, why I'm saying this is, on several occasions when an EFCC chairman leaves office, efforts are made to even recover seized properties from them. Yes.
And you let's not lose sight of the conversation, but if you're talking about the leadership of the EFCC being wealthy, you could also refer to how challenging that seat would be with the manner of exit of past EFCC bosses.
Yes.
But that's not the point. By your response, you may have also touched on cannily on how the leadership recruitment process is the problem, which the EFCC boss is speaking to by speaking about the high fees that lawyers charge politicians. And we could also refer to how cases now are determined, election cases now are determined in court, and the mandate of the people seems to have been sacrificed on the altar of litigations.
Yes.
Which is where part of the problem of our electioneering system is, where it lies.
That's right.
So isn't that part of the problem? Are lawyers and indeed the judiciary not also part of the problem?
Well, yes, they are. The judiciary in particular is part of the problem, because there are some judgments that comes out from the judiciary. You now wonder where these judges even went to school. When it becomes a difficulty for courts to define what and means, or it finds it difficult to give pronouncements on very explicit provisions of the law, you begin to wonder. But this is a societal decadence. It's a general problem. And we don't begin by finger pointing to professional bodies. We decide by ourselves. This country has to decide that, yes, we want to right wrongs. We want to right wrongs. And I hope that sooner than later we can make that decision.
All right, before we get back to Abuja City and begin to wind down, we've observed that things are clear and simple until people that are politically exposed get involved. It gets complicated.
That's right.
That's why it's almost a consensus everywhere you go that if it was perhaps you and I that was Yaya Bello, would have been in court since, and maybe the case would have been rounded up by now. But they were just able to get him yesterday. Why do you think that is? And how do we? Let's start talking about solution, because Nigeria belongs to all of us.
That's right. Now, the solution, we've been saying that all along, is for the EFCC to be more serious. More serious. Yes, if there was an error in the constitution to say some people have immunity, avoid those people that have immunity, go for the other people who are part of that rot. By the time the governor sees he cannot use the civil servants to perpetuate corruption, he has to stop. By the time you, as a civil servant or as a general, realizes that you can be arrested and prosecuted, that the governor cannot protect you. And this issue of governor protecting it's not possible, for goodness sake. The governor does not have arms. The governor can only send policemen or DSS officials to protect these civil servants. And for goodness sake, if the government has plans to curb corruption, I do not think that the DSS or the police hierarchy will support the protection of criminals.
Yes. I don't know how that will play out, because even the EFCC itself as an institution and the ICPC barely survived litigation at the Supreme Court. The governors were going for them to be scrapped at the end of the day. So
I actually believe they should be scrapped.
Oh, really?
Yes, because the EFCC has been a
well, the Supreme Court has made a pronouncement.
It's quite unfortunate.
It's final at the end of the day.
But the EFCC has reported recovering funds to the tune of billions of naira. So perhaps the EFCC has, to an extent, justified its existence. Maybe we should be asking the Ministry of Finance.
We'll take it to Abuja. The reason we deliberately didn't want to speak to the merit of the case, just speak around it so that I will not be prejudiced on this matter, because it's still in court and adjudication. Kennedy, is back to you.
Well, it's always a very interesting conversation around the EFCC, because on the one hand, we say we want to fight corruption, right? Everybody parrots it. We need to fight corruption, stamp out corruption. And then you see people go into court to get the anti-corruption agency out and declare it illegal. It's just always funny to hear that kind of narrative. But let's begin to wind down. I wonder what your thoughts will be on this particular one, because we say we want to fight corruption, right? And we know what corruption has done to us as a nation. And yet we see people going to court to say, let us scrap an anti-corruption agency in its entirety. So you wonder how much work we have on our hands. But let's also speak to perhaps what you expect from this particular case. Some had said, can we at least see the former governor carrying that placard that you see people carrying once the EFCC arrests them, and they will say the name of the person, the crime being alleged and all of that. Well, I don't know if you've seen that, a picture like that. Have you seen it? Is that something you think should be done if the law is really for everybody?
In that regard, I'm not sure. I have my reservation about that, so I just keep my opinion on that.
So should the EFCC stop it entirely? Or if it applies to certain people, it should apply to everybody?
Okay, this is what I think. I think taking mock shots of suspects who have not been found guilty by the court, I think it's unconstitutional. I think it's wrong. So insofar as they are suspect, they are all innocent until the otherwise is proven. So I really think taking mock shots of suspects shouldn't be something that the EFCC does. So if they could stop that, fine. So it's fine.
So right after the former governor, you don't expect the EFCC, since they didn't do it, or we've not seen for the former governor, we shouldn't see it.
No, that's not the basis upon which I am speaking. Right. I've had this opinion for a while
before now.
Yes.
Okay. So on a final note, your expectations from this particular one. Some have said we've seen cases like this in the past. EFCC has said, well, we've made lots of recoveries, so it's on the back of these cases that will make great recoveries, that will push back into the economy and all of that. Your expectations as we wind down?
Well, I expect that the former Governor Yaya Bello, I expect that he gives his utmost cooperation to the EFCC and to the courts. There's really nothing at stake here. If you are, it's nearly impossible for an innocent person to be proven guilty. So, nearly impossible, not entirely. Sometimes it may happen that the facts may not just be in your favor, but it's possible that an innocent person, a guilty person might be proven to be innocent eventually, but based on the facts. But it is very nearly impossible that somebody who is innocent is proven guilty. So I just would advise that he gives his cooperation to the EFCC and to the courts.
And ensure that justice is done.
And ensure that justice is done.
For the good of the people.
For the good of people.
I'd like to thank you so much, Hamzat Jamiu, legal practitioner, counsel to independent attorneys. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Also in our Lagos studio, Mr. Eze Eluche, legal practitioner. Thank you as well, sir, for your time.
Thank you very much.
We'll take a moment now, and when we return, we'll turn our attention to a very important matter. That's in a moment, so stay with us.